I would concentrate in my short time on two things: the performance of the European Union or Europe, and second, the institutions, because this is I think, in the center of this debate this morning. Now, being a Hungarian, I represent what we call a periphery country, and actually, when we talk about the European Union or the performance, economic, social performance of Europe as such, we have to take into account that Europe consists of a core, to use this neo-Marxist concept, and peripheries, but not one single periphery. We have the southern periphery, which has suffered from deindustrialization during the bubble years. Then the east periphery, or we would love to say the Central Europe, where we are now. And the third is the dependent modernizers like the Finnish, Irish, Baltic countries. And if you just look at the macro figures of these peripheries, you will see a very diverse picture. It's very hard to talk about the European economy because of these four components: core Europe and the peripheries move to sometimes to the different direction. The second, to measure the performance of any country or grouping within Europe is hard, because if I just look at the macro figures, GDP, or employment, or inflation, or capital stock, things that determine the economic well-being, and not to mention the quality of life, so just the macro things, we are challenged by new tendencies. We all heard about the Uber economy, and if you just take it as an example, cheaper, faster service provided by part-time entrepreneurs, which is good to the customer, but may reduce official GDP, being cheaper, faster, using less capital, since the drivers use their own capital. So therefore, if you look at macro figures and you feel that Europe is logged into what economists call secular stagnation, I feel that we might undervalue the European performance in the same way that we used to overvalue the performance of the BRIC countries. And I'm referred to the BRIC story because a decade ago the mood was that Europe is dying, Europe is a stagnation in a phase, but the BRIC countries, Brazil, India, China, Russia, South Africa, are doing well now. If we look at the macro figures, I think we have to admit that the shine has gone, and some of the BRIC countries don't perform too well. So on the performance issue, I belong to those who are a little bit less pessimistic about the future of the European economy, particularly if I think of the revolution which is underway, the Industrie 4.0. And I'm quoting in the German version, this fourth version, because as far as I can see, the German economy has made very important steps in adjusting to the challenges, and being in this part of the world, we have to do something with it. This fourth industrial revolution will reorganize our life, certainly will have an impact on not on the classical industrial production, but on the services, and there will be winners and losers. It's very hard to say who would be the winners and the losers. Typically, when we have a change, the youth are among the winners and the old guys are among the losers, but it's more complicated because some of the youth will win and others feel endangered by the changes and they need protection, and this is why the youth is divided in European Union and in Hungary in relation to the topics I'm going to shortly talk about. So the first thesis of mine, the European performance is very hard to judge, because if you look at the modern tendencies, the Uber economy it's not surprisingly that we have no inflation. The energy prices are part of the story, but also the capital saving technology is spreading fast. The GDP is a misleading variable. Employment is very hard to measure, and productivity, which seems to be on the decline, is I think is basically a very soft, has become a very soft economic variable. On the institutions, now that's, I think, is the crux of the story. When we talk about the European problem, to me as an economist, that appears as an institutional issue. Some of us talked and will talk about the euro, and I heard this morning the euro is a problem as a currency. I don't think euro is a problem. I think the eurozone is in a problem, and there's two different things. The euro is a pretty good currency. I wish I had more of it. And it's used not only in the eurozone countries. If I just take the Hungarian case, the Hungarian economy has a euro export which amounts to 70% of our GDP. Well, it's huge exposure. We have a euro import, 65% of our GDP. It's a huge exposure. If you want to rent an office space in Budapest, the prices are quoted in euro. So euro is used even if Hungary is not a member of the eurozone. So euro is fine. This is second only to dollar in terms of the international markets. But the eurozone as a construct is certainly a problem, and this is why I think we have to revisit the institutional things. Now, when I listened this morning to our British speakers and the whole Brexit story, one theme is the optimum level of regulation. If you talk to British, typically Britons would love less regulation. If you talk to economic decision makers, businessmen, the picture is a little bit more complex because businesses need regulation. For a Briton, for somebody who's grown up in a country with 4 decades of capitalism, it's perhaps you don't even recognize the importance of it. I, representing a country which had to forget old regulations of the communist era, had to learn new regulations. For us, it's an important message that capitalism needs clear institutions. Now, if I look at the European Union from this angle, then of course the EU is a very complex phenomenon. We have a lot of regulations, and perhaps too many. I agree with our British friends. But also, if it's an over-regulated entity, but the compliance is poor. Just think of what happened to the Stability and Growth Pact, what happened to the Maastricht criteria to entry to the Eurozone. Just think of the case of the Hellenic Statistical Office before the Troika took over in Hellas. So the member states that joined the European Union, bringing in their own regulation, their own culture, their own way of doing things, promised to apply a European level regulation, and we have a lot of regulations. You can make jokes of the size and number and detailed regulation, but in fact, on the periphery at least, we have another problem. We don't need deregulation, we needed re-regulation once we changed the regime, and this re-regulation turned out to be very half successful. The Hungarian regulation is detailed as elsewhere, but the compliance is pretty poor. So this is why I think we have to rethink the future of the institution. Now, I promise not to talk about Brexit being Hungarian, but certainly if I just think of the consequences of a potential leave, then I have a problem, just a theoretical viewpoint, how to define the regulation of the European Union of the future. One extreme is the superstate. Now we heard that there are forces for it. At least there has been a movement to create a superstate. I don't think this is the case now after the changes and shocks. The other mechanism to enforce regulation is peer pressure. This is practically the case now. The ECOFIN Council and other councils. Now the peer pressure has famously failed to provide a level of proper regulation. See the case of Greece, but also I could quote many other countries. As a Hungarian, I know of stories where we have been behind the European standards. And the third option, which is not peer pressure, which is a weak pressure, not a superstate, is the hegemonic power-centered regulation. Should the British leave, that would sound a little bit Germanic. So that's the third. There's one driver behind the changes, and the others would follow it. And although I promise not to take position on the stay or leave of Britain, but certainly after a potential leave, we would have an increased influence of Germany, perhaps too strong influence for some of us. Now, this is the situation, I think, and I'm sure that other speakers will come back to how they look at the achievements and the position of the European business life, the performance, economic and social performance of Europe, just by judging by the migration flows to Europe, and I'm not talking about those coming from war zones, but pretty rich guys coming from Russia, or the economic migrants leaving Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, and heading to Western Europe. I think the quality of life of the European Union countries, core countries, is something that we should not forget about. With all the problems, Europe is a magnet for young people and those who want to live in prosperity. Being a Hungarian, I cannot stop here without just a short reference to how the Hungarian government reacted to the institutional crisis and the economic crisis, because when I said that the seen by the macroeconomics, Europe is not doing that as bad as some people feel, but certainly we have had crisis years since the financial crisis of 2008. Now the Hungarian government decided that we need more industry, so industry-based growth model is offered to us, a sort of centralization and a sort of nationalization instead of privatization, instead of decentralization. I leave it to you and those in the whole stakeholders in Hungary, whether this short-term reaction will be useful in the long term. I have question marks attached to that, but that's not the topic for today. I'm just raising it because certainly when we talk about the European crisis or the problem in Europe, different countries would offer different opinions. Now, the only point I just would like to raise is going back to the euro. Hungary, as you heard, the present Hungarian government has no target date to enter the European Union, even if legally we are supposed to enter the club. But the regulation is such that there is no set target, and a lot is left for the government. and the Hungarian government doesn't seem to be determined on it, or put different ways. Let and see attitude is applied, but wait and see attitude is applied, but the present government's attitude is can be classified as cautious or negative. But I just like to repeat that we use euro daily. Government has a domestic currency for taxation purposes, but the pricing in industry is partly based on euro. Saving of the Hungarian general public is partly in foreign currency, including euro. Remittances from the Gastarbeiter, Hungarian guest workers working in the West, typically in euro, and don't forget that the flow of the remittances into Hungary amounts to probably the same size as the net flow of Brussels monies to Europe, to Hungary, also in euro. So Hungary has been euroized, even if the government doesn't have a policy on it. It's part of our life. And the mentioned exposure of Hungary to the Eurozone countries, both on the export side and import side, means that having a national currency is a huge risk, a risk which sometimes the decision makers are not aware of. They feel that the independence of the national currency is a protection against risks, which may be true, but on the other hand, this is a source of another sort of risk, which is also huge in a country which depends so much on the European Union and Eurozone countries.